Well, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you this morning?
Good.
Doing good? All right. Now, it is the 4th of July weekend, and I don't usually get really into that here at church because there's something higher that we serve here. Anybody know what that is? Jesus. That's right. For we serve it's a kingdom of heaven. Our citizenship is in heaven. I appreciate the veterans and people who have served because it gives us the freedom to meet like this. We've got brothers and sisters around the world today who've been put in prison for meeting like this in other countries, which is why we prayed for them to begin with. But that's what this day is about. That's in the sense that it affects us as a church, is we have this opportunity because of where we live and what's going on and what has gone on with this. We are in the Gospel of Luke chapter 9, verses 10 to 17. It's a fairly well-known event in the life of Jesus. Jesus feeds the 5,000, and if we look over in the Matthew passage, the Matthew version of this, in Matthew 14:21, it actually says 5,000 men plus women and children. And it's significant because the use for men is in the Greek is like the old use for men in English. It could mean men, women, children, everybody. So it could have been just 5,000, but Matthew makes it very clear. It's more than just that. So we're actually talking about Jesus feeds the 20,000, the 30,000. These numbers are more like this in reality. Now, I was going to do this really neat imagery for you. And about 8 months ago, knowing this sermon was coming up, I asked some of my friends back in Alaska if they would send me some smoked salmon steaks. Maybe 3-4 pounds of it. I figured that would be kind of a neat treat. We'd be able to spread out a little bit of these fish and stuff. And I had absolutely no takers. Now, when I was growing up, we just handed out salmon steaks all the time. Everybody had them. But the salmon runs are way down. And they're so far down that in May, I finally figured out why no one would give me any salmon steaks. Copper River King salmon hit Pike's Place Market up there in Seattle at $75 a pound. Now, if it takes 3 to 4 pounds of fresh salmon to make a pound of smoked salmon, so if I'm asking for 3 or 4 pounds, we're $700 to $1,500 I was asking for as a gift. Stunningly, I had no takers from a village where they make about $9,000 a year. And so we weren't able to do the smoked salmon this morning, but I did get some bread, and I asked the Thomas boys to come give me a hand. I hope I got enough here, but we're going to pass this out, and it's mostly as a reminder, because we're going to do another reminder today. You're on that side, you go in the middle. Just go ahead and pass them out. It's just a reminder because Jesus broke the bread and was able to give it to them. This is a dry piece of bread, and it's probably a lot like the dry bread that was handed out, because the scriptures, when we get to it, say that it was barley bread. But let's take a look at the scriptures while they're handing this out. Verse 10. We're page 733 in your Pew Bible. Verse 10. When the apostles returned, they reported to Jesus what they had done. Then he took them with him and withdrew themselves to a town called Bethesda. But the crowds learned about it and followed him, and he welcomed them and spoke to them about the kingdom of God and healed those who needed healing. Late in the afternoon, the 12 came to him and said, "Send away the crowds so they can go to the surrounding villages and countryside and find food and lodging, because we're in a remote place here." He replied, "You give them something to eat." And they answered, "We have only 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, unless we go and buy food for all this crowd." About 5,000 men were there. But he said to them, "Have them sit down in groups of about 50. And the disciples did so, and everyone sat down. And taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up into heaven and gave thanks, And he gave them to the disciples to set before the people, and they all ate and were satisfied. And the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces and leftovers. This miracle is unique in this situation because this is the only miracle of Jesus recorded in all 4 Gospels. Every other one of them we find in one Gospel or maybe 3 Gospels. This is the only one that's actually in all 4 Gospels. And it seems a little strange, at least it does to me. Okay, he's raised people from the dead. He's healed people who were blind. He's cast out demons. Why does a ministry of food make it to all 4 Gospels and not those? So I started to ask that question, and I started to look, and we're going to look into a little bit of that. We look at this, it's a great miracle, but really 6 hours later, everybody's hungry, right? And if you have teenagers in your house, maybe an hour later, everybody's hungry, right? Thank you. We'll get them one. So maybe an hour later, everybody's hungry. Why do we bother? Why did he do this miracle? Everybody's going to want to make him king later, but they only want to make him king because he fed them. John 6:26 tells us this. So why did they do this miracle at all? What's the point? And we're going to come in the end of this, and we're going to look back for a moment, and part of the point is what this represents. Because it's actually the last of a series of 5 miracles recorded here in the scriptures in a row. And we're right at the end, or the beginning of Jesus' ministry that will take him to Jerusalem. We're in the last 8 months or so of his life at this point. And so his ministry is kind of moving. It's turning a little bit. For years, people have said, is he a prophet? Is he somebody who's come back from the dead? Is he the Elijah who is to come? And we're going to talk about that some next week. But he's trying to make a point, and he's trying to help us overcome some stuff. And I want to do a quick review as a result. If you flip back into Luke chapter 8, you see he starts out with a series of parables, and then in verse 22, he has a ministry over a storm. He's able to calm the storm. And a large part of this has to do with the fact that there are 5 things in life as Christians or as people we commonly fear, right? And so these ministries, these miracles, are specifically to address some of our fears. Just like it kind of relates back to Jesus working with the Israelites and the Egyptians when he brings them out of Egypt. Each of the plagues of Egypt is related to a specific god of the Egyptians to show God is greater than these false gods. Each of these miracles helps us to address God is greater than our fear. Our fear of what? The first one is a storm, this severe storm, this supernatural storm, because a lot of times we have a fear of natural disasters, right? We had one going on just this week here, right? With the Goodwin fire over here. People are afraid of natural disasters. And then the next one down in verse 26, you get into this, and there's demons, and there's so many demons that they call themselves legion. And if you go to the Mark passage about this, there's so many demons, and he's so strong that even with chains, they can't tie him up. Sometimes we have a fear of the demonic, of the spirit world. And God's saying, okay, I was stronger than the natural world. I'm stronger than the spirit world as well. Jesus is greater than that. And we're going to come back to this and do a little more thorough. And then we go on and we get to verse 40. And in verse 40, Jairus comes up to Jesus and says, hey, my daughter's dying. Can you come heal her? He says, yeah, sure, I'll walk over there. And on the way, a lady walks up behind him that doctors haven't been able to heal for 12 years, and touches him, and he heals her. Because one of the other things that we're afraid of is disease, illness. We have no way of explaining it. Something happens, and Jesus is saying, oh, I'm greater than that. And then if you get down at the end there, in verse 52, 53, he says to the child, child, get up, because she's dead. Because one of the other things that we fear is what? Death. And Jesus is saying, I'm greater than death. Just like he did with all of those evil, false gods with the Exodus, he's dealing with our fears and these false fears, showing that he is greater than these things. So we come to this one, and this is the last of this series of 5 miracles, where God is showing, I am greater than. Jesus is greater than hunger. And I'll open that up a little bit further. He's greater than any of our physical needs, because we have fears of, I'm not going to have enough clothes, I'm not going to have enough, my house isn't going to be good enough, I'm not going to be able to pay the rent, I'm not going to be able to pay the mortgage, pay for my car, pay. And Jesus is saying, okay, we got this. Your 5 great fears, I can handle it. So let's look at this a little bit further. It says, first, when the apostles had returned. Remember last week, actually now it would be 2 weeks ago, but it would have been the last week in this series, where Jesus sent the apostles out, and he gives them the power to cast out demons and the power to heal the sick, and then he tells them, don't take anything with you. Don't take anything with you, but go preach the gospel. And so they come back, and they're telling all of the things that happened with them, and they're telling them to Jesus, and Jesus says, hang on. We're going to take some time out. We're going to get away from the crowds a little bit. We're going to go up to Basin and take a break. In the military, we call it a debrief after a mission, right? We're going to have a debrief and see what happened. Why'd that happen? How'd it work? What can we do different next time? So you're going to go up into the wilderness, and they're going to debrief. And he takes them out there, and it's this small town right on the very, very, very north end of the Sea of Galilee, just outside of Capernaum by about 4 miles. And they're doing their debrief. See, sometimes that's good in ministry. It's good to get everybody together and go, okay, let's take a breather. What's going on? What's worked? What's not worked? Jesus is modeling that for us. But he also models the next thing. They're doing their after-action reports, and they get interrupted. He's only 4 miles away. That's not that long of a walk. So it says the crowds come. And when they learned about it, they followed him. And my reaction would have been, hey, we're over here on our retreat. Leave us alone for a little while. But that's not Jesus' response. What's Jesus' response? He welcomes them. And he preaches to them. It actually says he spoke to them about the kingdom, which is a code word for he was preaching. He shared the gospel. And he healed those in need of healing. So all of these people come, they interrupt their retreat, and Jesus says, okay, we'll take care of it. We're going to share the gospel with them. We're going to heal them. And that's what's going on here. So instead of being inconvenienced by people, he welcomes them. And then in the late afternoon, it says there, late afternoon, the 12 come to him, the apostles, and they've seen him. They were the ones that have seen all of these miracles. They've seen him provide for them on an individual basis, because he sent them out with no money, no food previously. They saw that and they were like, okay, Lord, that's all well and good, but now send everybody into the surrounding villages and countryside to find food and lodging, because we're in a remote place here. Well, that's kind of a nice thing to say, because, hey, look, it's going to be a 4-mile walk back just to Capernaum. And Capernaum at the time, according to history, was about 1,500 people. I don't know what the disciples were thinking was going to happen in Capernaum, because if we've got 20,000 people in the crowd, there's probably not enough rooms in Capernaum for them to stay. Even if they go to Bethsaida and to Capernaum and to everywhere else, there's probably not enough room. But the apostles are saying, hey, send them out so they have enough time to get this taken care of. It's practical. But Jesus, no. I have something else I want you to do. You give them something to eat. And they look around at each other, I'm sure, and they're like, how's that going to work? And if you look in the Matthew version of the story or the Mark version, it says, look, if we had 200 denarii and there was a market big enough around here, because let's face it, in a town of 1,500 people, there's not a market big enough to feed 20,000 people. I mean, really, that would be like us going up to Prescott with 1 million people and going, think we can get enough food at Walmart to feed 1 million people today? Well, even if they had the money, we can't do that. Now, for relationship, it's Matthew 14:37 where they respond with this. 200 denarii is 200 days' wages for a country worker. So we'll imagine it roughly equates to $100. 1 denarius. But that comes out to $20,000. And what they really say is for $20,000, we'd have just enough to give each of them a morsel, which is probably true today. If we had 20,000 people here and we spent $20,000 on food, what's a dollar's worth of food? Not a whole lot, right? Hey, each of them, you got 2 slices of bread. Everybody else, you get nothing. And that's all you get. It's still just enough energy to walk back to somewhere. And they're like, look, even with $200, there's not enough. They're probably freaking out a little bit at this point. Look, if we had $20,000, we couldn't feed all these people. And he's going, no, you feed them. You got this. Well, Andrew's apparently an optimist because John 6:8-9, it tells us here in Luke that the disciples go, well, we have 5 loaves and 2 small fish. John 6 actually tells us this was Andrew. He's ever the optimist. This is also the one that brought Peter to Jesus. If you look in John 1, Andrew's always bringing people to Jesus. Here, this is Jesus. I don't know what you're going to do with this, but this is who Jesus is. He's always bringing people to Jesus, which is a good example for us. But he brings this, and it's 5 loaves and 2 fish. And actually, what it says is 5 small barley loaves and 2 fish. Basically, he walks up and he meets Bud out here, and he takes Bud's lunch sack, and he goes, I got the lunch sack for 1 teenage boy. Can you feed 20,000 people with that? And that's what just happened. And it's a boy who's from a poorer family because, let's face it, barley is what you use when you can't find wheat, and you can't find oats, and you can't find spelt, and you can't, because it's a coarse grain. This is a lower class family. He's going over to this family, this kid who, this was all he had. He says, well, Jesus, will this feed 20,000 people? Can we offer this up? But Jesus responds to that. He says, if $20,000 won't feed these people, 5 small loaves, use slightly coarse bread, it's slightly hard bread on purpose. Oh, that's perfect. Have everybody sit down. They're going, what? $20,000 won't feed them, but the lunch from a small boy will. Have everybody sit down, he says. Sit them in groups of 50 each, and the disciples did so, and they sat everybody down, and taking the loaves and the fish, he looked into heaven, and he gave thanks, and he broke it. I did it over here so that the person vacuuming won't have to clean it up. And then he gave it to the disciples, and the disciples start to give this food out. And they give the food out. And remember, $20,000 wasn't going to buy enough food for them to be able to feed everybody just a little bit. but 5 small loaves and 2 fish feed the crowd so much that at the end of it, it says they pick up 12 baskets of leftovers. 12 baskets of leftovers. Now there's a significance in that number because how many apostles are there? 12. Jesus is going, I don't need you looking over each other's shoulders to see what happened. You're each going to have this basket and go, that's what 5 barley loaves and 2 fish looks like after 20,000 people eats from it? And the next one's going, wait, I have the same as you do. All 12 of them have this. See, that miracle really isn't for those 20,000 people. And we think of it and oh wow, we fed 20,000 people. The miracle was for the apostles. Because the apostles get to see the power of God. The apostles get to see God has the power. Jesus has the power to provide even for 20,000. You know, it's one thing if I go out by myself, as it happened in the previous passage, and God provides enough food for 2 of us. God said, no. I got this. 5 loaves, 2 fish. We got enough food for 20,000. With enough leftovers for you to be able to go, wow, that was cool. And the point here is we're dealing with fear again because what are we afraid of? We're afraid we're going to go without. We're afraid we're not going to have enough. We're afraid that our physical needs, the hierarchy of needs, the pyramid, isn't going to be met. The base isn't going to be met. Jesus is going, I got that. I got that. I have the power over that. I'm going to take your 5 greatest fears, and in each one of them, I'm going to demonstrate my power over it. Because what's going on is now Jesus is turning. And he's turning from introducing himself to the people to preparing the disciples to lead the church when he's gone. He needs them to know, no matter what, when I send you out, you can rely on me. Because I have the power over that. No matter what, when you trust in me, I've got that power. I can take care of that for you. And he needs them to see it. And that's what's gone on here. One of our big things at the end of this, remember 2 weeks ago, he had forbidden the people to talk about or to take anything with them. It says he provides everything for them. And they come back and they see it. But remember, our Father owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. Psalm 50:10. It says, don't be afraid to ask. You can't ask more than he can give for you. You need a day's meal, and it's provided from last week. But this week, you need 20,000 meals, and I can still provide that for you. I can still take care of that. I provided it just from the boys' lunch. This is the message for the disciples. He's preparing them. He's discipling them to trust you. In everything, to trust him. But this message is for us too. Do we trust God with everything? Even today, here we are 2,000 years later, and what are still our 5 greatest fears? The supernatural, because we have no way of controlling it. Natural disaster, because we have, no way of controlling it. Sickness, because we have no way of controlling it. And death, because we have no way of controlling it. And in the end of it all, Jesus is saying, I control that. And so he takes the food and he provides for the physical needs as well. And he says, I control that too. Because I'm going to send you out. And I'm going to send you out and you're going to see it because I am greater than your physical needs, just like I'm greater than all your other fears. See, and that's the message for us today. We can take this and look and trust God with everything. Our greatest fears and our greatest needs. God's got this. He's taking care of it. If he asks you to go somewhere else, if he asks you to go to another country, if he asks you to do missions, if he asks you to, God forbid, work in a big city like Phoenix on a regular basis, he can still take care of all of those needs for us. Do you trust him with everything, including your fears? That's his message for us today.